Order. Please rise and join me in the Star Spangled Banner. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Gene, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome, Gene.
Thank you. Sorry I'm not there.
All right. Okay.
Thanks for your help.
FOIA notifications been made. So we have an agenda. Oh, and meeting of minutes of the May 6th. Are there any comments, corrections, additions? If not, hearing none, without objection, the minutes are approved. All right. Any questions about the agenda? I'm going to ask, but I'm sure we don't have anybody who would like to make a citizen comments. All right, hearing none, let's get on to the action items. We're here with a continuance, if you will, in consideration of an ordinance amending the Community Development Code Division 6.3 Traffic Impact Analysis to update traffic impact analysis standards. Kevin, you want to take the...
Good afternoon, Commission.
Good afternoon.
We're here to re-bring forward the TIA ordinance amendment. Basically, the Commission had a few concerns, a few questions at our last meeting, and we came up with changes that were requested by the Commission. And the first change had to do with comprehensive master plan language, reinserting that language. So we reinserted that language. You should see it in your packages. We also reinserted the 50 trip threshold that was previously there as well. We spent a lot of time last time talking about and around the escrow account piece of this amended TIA ordinance. So all questions and concerns concerning the escrow piece of it will be answered by our Assistant County Administrator, Jared Fralix, and he's here tonight to speak to those issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Kevin, and Planning Commission. Thanks for the opportunity. One, for you guys hearing this. I'm hopeful with this ordinance that it's a regional step forward in the right direction as we plan together, not just for Beaufort County, but as others hopefully follow suit. So, one, obviously I didn't attend, but heard some of the comments in regards to the interest account. And in an account like this, so finance has a chart of accounts where we do project accounting. So every project that we do, whether it's a full design project or whether it's a separate set-alone project, we have project accounting so we can establish a code where that funding resides. So it's set aside from our general funding into a certain location with a certain type of moniker, so we know exactly where that is and where it's located. Then inside of that, as far as interest, so interest is something that the intent of this is not to be a moneymaker from the interest side of the account. The intent is to have the money sit there, pool there, and then make the improvements. Interest is dealt with on the treasurer side of the house. So what the treasurer does is they coordinate with the finance department and take a look at all the pooled cash. So finance has the chart of accounts of what the cash in the checking account is attributed to, and then the treasurer is responsible for managing the cash as it resides. So depending on whether it's a short term, how liquid it is, how much we need access to it in the short term is where it's invested at, and obviously that's a much lower return, and then midterm and long term. And so to give you a specific answer on the interest, I don't have that. That would be something that the treasurer would do depending on our interaction with finance on the project and finance interaction with the treasurer. So I know that's a roundabout answer to tell you about interest, but don't really have the specifics. The goal is to use the funding that's established And then from there, if it does earn interest, then it would be between finance department and treasurer where that interest, whether it goes back to that specific account or whether it goes to general fund to fund county operations.
Okay. Any questions you would like to ask, Mr. Freilich?
Yes, okay, so you're talking about interest on an escrow account, right? I think what our questions were last time had to do more with, is it an open-ended escrow? How long does it go for? It seems like if you put yourself into perspective from the developer,
Yep.
he's gonna have to set aside some money to pay for potentially new traffic signals that might or might not happen in the future, and for how long? It's like saying, okay, here, take my 20,000 or 50,000 or whatever the number might be, and you're just not quite kissing it goodbye,
Sure.
but it just seems
Yeah,
a little unfair.
So in that regard, so it would be a check, a set aside from the developer, and then the county would hold and reside that cash for those set aside improvements. What's not established is the time frame, whether that's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. We've had that, and that's common language, like in a development agreement or anything like that. Whenever there's set aside funds, that if those funds aren't utilized within X period of time, then they return to that said developer.
Okay.
And I don't know that there's anything in the ordinance. I mean, it's definitely something we can look at. And the intent here, and this is what I hope to really get across, is the intent is right now, the way development happens, and say a signal improvement is as case in point, is if a developer A comes in and their traffic study says they don't meet that warrant, they may have to do some side improvements, but the signal isn't warranted, they're not responsible for putting a dime towards that signal installation today. And then developer B comes in and they don't have to do any improvements, but they meet the warrant. Their trips generate enough trips to signal that A plus B have enough trips to that intersection. Now they're the sole responsible to bear that cost, even if their development may be smaller than development A was. So what we're trying to do with this is be more proactive. And a good example is we actually have one that we're working currently now on Buckwalter and Parkside Boulevard, Woodbridge, right there. So there's a three-way agreement, and what we're trying to do is be proactive. We have an access management plan that says this is where the signal will be located. And unfortunately, in traffic engineering and traffic world, it's based off data, and data in traffic world is accidents. And what we're trying to accomplish there was exactly what we're bringing forward in this ordinance, is to say, okay, we know that there will be an intersection here when it meets. And on that particular road, Beaufort County owns Bluffton Parkway, so we have more control than on a DOT road. But we own that, and we know already that it's challenging to get out of there. If you live in Woodbridge neighborhood or the reserve right there beside Woodbridge, we hear those comments all the time that it's challenging to get out there. And typical traffic data would say it doesn't meet the warrant and there's not enough accidents. Sorry, sit on the signal. However, we know there's development coming across the street and development coming up there. And so let's be proactive, and we're working with the three developments, or two developments and the subdivision. So we're representing the subdivision the county is, as that's unincorporated, and then development A and development B, all are working together to see how much each unit is generating in traffic, and dividing the cost of the planned improvements, whatever that cost is, by their appropriate share. And then everybody fund that share, and then we install it. Even if it's not necessarily warranted today, we know it will be warranted when those come along, versus wait till developer A builds, they didn't meet the threshold, and developer B builds, and finally they have to hit the burden of all of it. So that's the intent. The only part that we don't have is the timeline.
I guess my only thing would be that I've rarely seen anything like this codified in an ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could be boxing yourself in by doing that. it almost sounds like this is a business arrangement that you might, or a development agreement or something you might want to have instead of coding it into an ordinance. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah,
So, I don't
and
know.
another thing, again, what the intent of this, and this is what I hope you guys are looking at, the broad picture, what we're trying to solve, is another example, and we just had this, Kevin went to this meeting here recently. In the town of Hardyville, they have a ton of projects and old development agreements. Those development agreements have been established some 10, 15, 20 years and have been sold a couple of times over. Well, now we see a higher interest of those developers building in those neighborhoods. And they have a traffic impact analysis, either it's done or they're in the process of redoing it. But what's not going on is an apples to apples comparison. So developer A has this growth model, developer B, this other one. And so what we don't have at the local government side is the right data to say, okay, we know that 278 needs improvement, but we don't have data on when that improvement, whether it needs to happen in 2 years or 6 years. And you have a development that's planned so many homes, and you know how fast you intend to build those homes and what your growth rate is established with that. So what this ordinance would do is to make sure that if developer A is from Atlanta and developer B is from Jacksonville and developer C is from Charleston, they're only using their own data. Well, what we're doing locally through this ordinance would be, we have a repository of information stored with our local selected traffic engineers, consulting firms, that if developer A came in from Atlanta, they would know what B and C are already doing. So in their traffic report, one, they have to use the same growth rate because we have that established. And two, they would also have to factor in these next door developments such that their true impacts and their needed improvements are appropriate. Because right now, I don't know that we're getting somebody come in and then they goes directly to DOT, and DOT gives them a driveway permit, which may or may not be exactly where we want it. And then secondly, it may not have been coordinated with the development B and C and how their growth and how their impacts are associated. So this collects all the data, and then we can source our on-call engineers to help us maintain that data and equalize it. So that's the big, what our goal is, what our intent is.
Okay.
Have
Yes,
you,
go ahead.
what's your impression of the way developers, if you have an impression yet, are thinking about the way you're using the on-call and the change in that process? And from what you've just said, it sounds like it would be a very good thing. for
Yeah, I mean, it
developers to
is.
have a
So-
larger catchment basin of
And,
data.
well, and Kevin and Jennifer can speak to this. So I think there's two different ways it can be sourced through the ordinance is one, they can come and utilize our consulting engineer. So if they want to just say, okay, we've got to hire a traffic engineer, tell us what traffic engineer we use one of these three. That would be option A. Option B is they come in from Atlanta and they already have their traffic engineer, and they can stick with their own traffic engineer, but then they would have to pay for us to have our 3 engineers, consultant engineers, to review to make sure it is appropriate. So a developer never likes to spend money, so or more money than they have to. And of any size development, this is a really minor cost as far as to make sure that the traffic impact analysis is the same.
But from a policy point of view, it seems to make a lot of sense from a planning point of view.
Yeah, so there's a couple other areas in the state, I think Dorchester and Berkeley. I know Jennifer, she does a lot of work in the area, but also throughout the state, and has seen this couple different ways, different models in the Charleston and Dorchester area.
Yes, in the Charleston area, Somerville, town of Somerville and Dorchester County are actually on their second round of this. So they've been doing it for 5 years. They actually are just starting their second set of 5 years. And then Berkeley County is also doing it as well. City of North Charleston is doing it, and there's a couple other municipalities more in the Charleston County, Berkeley County, Dorchester region that are considering it as well. So it's been it's a little new down here, but as we said, we went to the LATS Policy Committee and also technical committee. So there's been a lot of folks that are real interested in this process. But yeah, it's not for here, it's a little bit of a newer process, but not across the state.
Great, thanks.
Further questions?
Jennifer, just one question. You said they're doing their second round of this. Did they have to do a lot of tweaking to get it better? From what they thought originally, or,
No,
When you say
they
tweak, I
didn't
don't know
change
what that
their,
means.
they didn't change their ordinance. They just had selected, they had they did their first selection. It went through the number of renewals
Of
and then,
consultants.
of consultants, and then they just did their second selection of consultants. And that process is starting for that, basically. They're kind of going through the contractual with the on-call consultants. But the ordinance, to my knowledge, has not changed.
so they've had good success with this?
They've been the people that I've talked to, the municipalities and the counties have been very happy with the process.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I'm going to ask for a motion.
Oh, I have a question.
Please raise your hand. Go ahead.
Oh, but it wasn't about finance, they were just about other kinds of questions. Okay. No, like not, did you have a good day? On, let's see, 6.3.20 applicability, which was all struck out, F. So about the EEA requirement, which is for residential development, residential care facilities, hospitals, hotels, blah, blah, shall submit an emergency evacuation analysis. So that's stricken, but I didn't see it captured anywhere else, and I do think that's important. So again, the reference is in old applicability 6.3.20, or no, it's under general TIA requirements, the next one. And so it's capital letter F. Right there.
Right,
Let's
so
see.
the emergency evacuation analysis, that was kind of something from the old ordinance, and wasn't something that had been really required. I mean, technically it was in the ordinance, but hadn't been required over the years, so it's something that that isn't part of like the standard Department of Transportation standards for a traffic study. So since it hadn't really been being asked for in quite a while, from the county standpoint, that wasn't something that we included. Typically, what it would be is you would look at the emergency evacuation routes and just say, well, this is residential development here. You would take this route to this route to this route. So it wasn't from the staff at the time, it wasn't as meaningful as it was basically just identifying an emergency evacuation route in the traffic study. There wasn't any analysis associated with it.
So it sounds like you're saying it seems obvious, like it doesn't need to be spelled out, because that would be an obvious part of the TIA.
Yeah, you just have, the emergency evacuation routes are what they are, and they're established by the emergency management department, not by the traffic folks. And so it was basically, what you were doing is you're taking kind of what was already established by a different department in the county and saying just saying, here, this is what it is. So that's why it was taken out. As I said, it hadn't been included in traffic studies in quite a while in the county.
Okay, just a clarification if you don't mind. 6.3.30, traffic study preparation and/or review. So letter E, the project civil engineer shall design on-site vehicle circulation, queuing, and parking patterns so as not to interfere with the flow of traffic, et cetera. The last sentence in that graph is cross-access shall be required between parcels where applicable. And my question is, do you mean parcels in one development, or parcels, to go back to what Kevin was talking about earlier, but in two, like, different subdivisions?
So
I just
typically,
don't know what
yeah.
cross-parcel
So
means.
typically what that is, and I'll just kind of give an example of one in a different jurisdiction that we're looking at. There's a gas station on a corner, and there's a retail development going in next to it. And basically, when the gas station was built, they had to kind of add like a little connector to potentially connect to the adjacent parcel in the future. So it's adjacent, when we say cross-access, it's between adjacent parcels that are not necessarily owned, they're not owned by the same
That's
person.
exactly what I was asking. I mean, like Argent Boulevard and 170 might be an example where that gas station is. And we all know that Argent Boulevard, that intersection is sort of a nightmare.
Right, it's so to encourage,
Yeah.
cross-access isn't always appropriate. It really depends on the use, and that's where it says where applicable, because sometimes the uses aren't complementary, so you wouldn't want that, but in adjacent parcels that, where it makes sense, you would want people to be able to travel, not get back to the main road, to
Sure.
then go back
Go
into
back in. Yep.
the retail right next door.
My last question.
Okay?
I don't know the planning timeline of new schools, for example, but the very end of this, 6.3.70, the expiration of a TIA. And so, item 4 is, if the built environment dictates a change in land use or traffic distribution from what was previously contemplated within an approved TIA, then there would be, a consequence. So, I mean, we know in, like Malin Bluff, in that area, the school is now there, but, the new development and so on is, and the queuing in particular on 170 is affecting that school. So what do you ask of developers? Is it just a matter of course that it's their responsibility to be in touch with the school committee or the school superintendent and ask for a plan of where new schools are going to be built so they can adjust their plans? How does that work? I'm not clear. I mean, if a change is going to be made and the developer doesn't know it, or should they know it? Should you tell them? I mean, I guess,
So-
it seems to me there's a real opportunity there for stuff to fall through the cracks.
Are you saying for existing schools?
No, for potential, so in the next 3 to 5 years, for example.
So schools themselves have to go through the traffic study process. And so that would be, so they would have their own traffic studies associated with the data that the school district provides to the traffic engineer.
Got
So
it.
if you put in a new school, there's a study associated with that. If there's a development that is anywhere in the county, and we look at a distribution in and out of that development, and we take into consideration where people are going. Are they going to schools? Are they going to work? Are they going to retail? Are they going wherever, recreation? And so I think to answer your question is, if it's, the schools themselves have their own traffic studies of their ins and outs, but if it's just a development that's somewhere, then they would have to, distribute their traffic appropriately. If it's a development that's next to an existing school, for example, then we do have them usually look at a school PM peak hour. So we talked the other day about, we've got AM peak hour, that 1 hour between 7 and 9, PM peak hour, that 1 hour between 4 and 6. We also, if they're adjacent to a school or close to a school, we do have them look at that 2 to 4 period as well, because that's when a lot of that peak traffic
the queuing,
happens,
yeah.
right? So, but that's usually for existing schools, because we've really got that,
Much better data.
you just know that data. You don't have, if it's proposed, we don't know that information at that time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done.
All right. Further questions?
The new school has its own traffic study that does not go through county procedures?
Well, you would do, any development will have a traffic study completed. So when you have a new school that's proposed, there's an architecture team and a civil team that's designing the schools and everything. There's typically a traffic study that's associated with the school that is reviewed by the county and by the county and by the state.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, and then I have one more question. In the beginning of the 6.3.10, we talked about the approved by the administrator/manager and his or her designee. I heard the answer last time, and I wasn't quite on board with it then. When you say administrator/manager, are you talking about the county administrator, or are you talking about somebody who's the head of the traffic department? That's what I don't
Yeah, so
understand.
typically, I think we were thinking that would be like the engineering director would go
Engineering
that.
director.
It could be the ACA, but we were thinking that would likely be like the engineering director, but that's whoever basically the ACA would deem it to be. It's intentionally kind of loosely written so that it could be somebody in the engineering staff. It just depends on whoever.
But it's not the county administrator.
It's not that's not the
Okay, so
intention,
I
is that
think
it's not the
I
county
think
administrator.
In that case, I would suggest that we put some sort of a definition of what you mean by the administrator, manager,
Okay.
in like in the beginning section, so that it's not confused with
Okay.
the overall county administrator.
Yeah, the intention was not that it would be the overall county administrator making that
Yeah, okay.
designation.
That's my only
Yeah.
thought on that. Because you're codifying it, remember?
Yeah, yeah,
And I get you don't want to put somebody's name there, so you got to put a title down, but
right.
I don't want the title to get confused with who you really mean to be the person who's gonna approve this thing, so.
And just to clarify, I understand that what you're saying is that within the multiple jurisdictions that are looking to adopt this, it can be different people at different
Correct.
levels within that government, so you need to keep a fairly generic title in there.
Correct.
So it may even be difficult to craft a definition. I'm not sure, because it's going to be determined based on that particular jurisdiction.
And that's a comment that we can kind of take, and as it,
Yeah.
you know, that'll get refined as it moves forward.
Okay.
Okay, that's it.
Are we ready to make a motion? May I have a motion?
I'm happy to make one, if Kristen, if you could scroll it to the beginning so I can get the case number, please. Sorry, thank you. So regarding case number CDPA 00037-2024, regarding the amendment to the Division 6.3 Traffic Impact Analysis of the Community Development Code, based on the testimony that we heard today, as well as the testimony in last month's public hearing and the information provided in the staff report, I would make a motion to recommend approval to the county council.
Do I have a second? Cecily, you second?
No, did you second it, Ed?
No,
I'll
I
second.
can't second.
Oh, I thought.
Go ahead.
Oh, you were asking for a second.
Yes,
I will second it.
all right. Further discussion,
And that's to include this last little bit with the administrator thing, change. You're gonna have to make a change, right? You're asking the approval for what's written.
That's correct, that's what
I'm
we're
asking
asking.
for what's already there, yeah.
Yes.
I think it should be intentionally left, I don't know, at their discretion, because you're gonna
I do
have all
too.
these jurisdictions, you know, Port
Okay,
Royal, Hilton Head.
that's fine.
Well,
That's, I mean, is John that your intent?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. that would-
Unless you want to make an amendment to the motion, we're going to stick with the motion. Okay, any
Well,
further?
the problem is I can't come up with anything that fits the bill, so we'll just go with the motion.
All right. All those in favor of the motion, recommendation of the TIA analysis? Raise your hand so I can see.
Gene?
Okay, it's unanimous, including Jean on the
That's
video.
yes.
All right. Motion passes, and recommendation will go forward. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work on all this. It was a lot of work,
Yeah, thank you.
obvious, very complicated job. And the fact that you're trying to go regional with something like this is, I think it's commendable, and I like the interconnectivity of multiple developers. That is something that is sorely missing. Thank you. All right. I think, Mr. Freilich, you're up next. Item number 8, transportation sales tax projection, the presentation.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll give you guys y'all are getting the in-stride brief because we are meeting about this tomorrow at Public Facilities. We have a special call meeting about that. So just, I guess, how much do you know or don't know? I can tell you what's included, or you tell me. I can start from the beginning, or I can.
Well, I've heard the presentation, so I'm pretty much familiar with it, but I don't know how familiar.
Okay, I'll give a quick summation. So in general, what is being proposed, County Council discussed a transportation sales tax in 2022. They had a sales tax committee, and they made a recommendation of 10 years and $700 million. The sales tax committee did. And they studied it for about 5 months and made that recommendation in May of 2022. And then shortly thereafter, Senator Davis had authorized the green space sales tax. So County Council said, you know what, we're going to move forward with green space for now, but we're coming back to roads, transportation later. So in 2023, they established another sales tax committee in July, and that committee met for a period of months as well. And then by the end of the year in 2023, they made a revised recommendation of a sales tax program to County Council for 15 years, $1.625 billion. So that recommendation was brought forward to committee and to council in January of this year, and council took that forward, and they had first and second reading of an ordinance of that 15-year program. At that time, they were starting to get some feedback and questions and said, you know what, let's pause and let's go around the community and give an informational brief to the different parts of the community. So we had 5 informational sessions throughout the month of April, and then it came back to county council for further discussion and consideration. And it came basically to council just to get referred back to committee. And basically what committee's assignment was talk about what we've heard in these informational sessions, determine if we need to make any tweaks or modifications, and then send that back to county council for what would be a third and final reading. So what's required by the state is that in order to have a referendum on the ballot in November, you have to have it approved prior to August 15th. Has to be sent to voters registration, and then it shows up on the ballot in November. So county council is working through that. Tomorrow, they referred it back in May 13th to public facilities in the end of May. And we ran out of time. We had a loaded agenda and talked about too many other things, and this was something that needed full time and attention, so they created a special workshop. And that special workshop is tomorrow at 10 a.m. from 10 to 12 to go into the details. And what's proposed is the different things that we heard throughout the community included things of the length of time was a concern for some folks. Completing some of the older projects, the 2018 projects, that was a concern. In Bluffton, we heard about Bluffton 5B. That was obviously a concern in the town of Bluffton. And in the northern parts, we heard about pathways and we heard about dirt roads. So those are the things that public facilities will be considering, and then they'll be taking that up, like I said, tomorrow, whether they modify, make any tweaks, adjust any project amounts, and then that'll be brought back to county council for most likely, depending on if any changes, it may go back for a duplicate second reading to a modified second reading and public hearing, and then a third reading probably towards the end of June, 1st of July. So that is a recap, and I can gladly give more information if there's any questions, and take that.
I think the documents, the meeting I attended, you gave us a handouts kind of summary.
Yep.
I thought was very, very helpful and kind of explanatory. And also, you can visit the BeaufortCountyPenny.com website to get further updates and information. So maybe someone from your team can maybe just send a copy forward to the planning folks, and we can get a copy of that if you'd
Sure.
be interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can.
Is the meeting tomorrow, is that a public meeting? So it'll be
It is, yeah,
videoed?
it's been advertised, and it's not our normal time, but it is a special meeting, so it's at 10 o'clock, fully open to the public. And again, it'll be workshop style, so it'll be more of council working through what they want, or a committee working through what they want to send back to county council.
Do you know if it'll be, streamed?
Yes, ma'am, it should be live like our regular committee and council meetings.
Great.
Questions? Thank you, Jared.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Okay. Where the heck am I here? Bear with me a second. I really don't have anything else to report unless we have other business. Any other business? If not, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.